There we are. Hi, hello.
Hello.
So welcome, Elena Sautkina. I'm really pleased to welcome you today for this little interview. You're the Professor of Environmental and Social Psychology in the Highest School of Economics in Moscow.
Right.
So I'm really excited for this conversation to hear more about the interconnected relationship between environment and economics especially. So thank you so much for your time, Elena. If you'd like to just give us a little introduction and background for yourself to start.
So thank you so much for inviting me, Mary. I think your endeavor is really needed in our times. So my background is in environmental psychology. So I've been doing research and teaching in environmental psychology since about 20 years now. And I'm working on topics such as sustainable behaviors, pro-environmental behaviors, sustainable consumption, climate change, and related topics, a little bit about urban sustainability. So basically sustainability and environmental change sort of taken together. And I guess what we need nowadays from the point of view of environmental psychology is to find ways to encourage pro-environmental behaviors, understand the causes and conditions in which environment-related behaviors occur, and find ways how social sciences, psychology included, can contribute to especially mitigation, but also unfortunately adaptation to climate change, which is already a threat that is, you know, on our doorstep, standing and coming into our house somehow at the moment. So this is what we're trying to do, and this job is really urgent.
Yes, it is. And you've described the very interesting topics that you cover within your studies and also your teachings. And this is my first question, might feel a little bit obvious, but if you could describe how your work supports environmental sustainability, and particularly just elaborate on the significance of being ecologically sensitive, how we can, the significance of that for us as individuals.
So how is support sustainability? I think I've just explained now. Well, of course, science, you know, we tend to think that science is somewhere far away, that we cannot really, you know, that scientists don't necessarily influence, you know, it can be even from the perception coming from ourselves that we do a lot of scientific work that ends up as published papers, but in scientific journals. But actually many of us and myself personally for the last sort of 10 plus years, I've been working with local governments in research that has been commissioned by and or sponsored by local governments, by also national governments. And obviously, you know, that when lessons that we produce, the evidence that we produce is taken and applied on the spot by people who are interested in scientific evidence, who are interested in implementation of you know, behavior change programs, that can become really efficient. So I would think that this is our biggest contribution to sustainability. Of course, from a larger perspective, I think what we're doing, because I think what we're doing, we're taking a larger stance, and usually when you take a larger systems-wide stance, it definitely contributes to sustainability, because the opposite, the lack of sustainability, short-sightedness, it's tunnel vision somehow, it's failure to recognize the connections to other areas. So probably from that point of view, at least, you know, some kind of things that we're trying to do, we're doing in this sense.
Thank you.
in
That
terms of
leads very
systems.
well into the question I wanted to ask as well. If you could talk a bit about how this relates to social justice. You've spoken a bit about behaviour change, but also the relevancy of environmental sustainability. So how more specifically in terms of social justice?
Well, social justice, you know, if we think about climate change, for example, or if we think about access to green areas, we talk a lot about social inequalities, right? So social inequalities is something that is recognized as a problem. So in terms of climate change, we know that those who are already being affected and those who will be affected in future especially will be women, children, minorities, and usually people who are already discriminated in many, you know, other ways, or sort of under receive the support. So from that point of view, focusing on these questions is really important. At the moment I'm working in Russia, so I'm back to my home country since 2018. Here we definitely do have a lot of social inequalities right now. So what we're also trying to do is to focus on regions where environmental threats are particularly strong. And from that point of view, we're definitely contributing to the topic of, you know, combating social inequalities. Generally, this topic interests me quite a lot, and actually, I think that all my life I was working on topic of social justice anyhow. So whether that would be, you know, urban inequalities, access to, you know, good quality environments, good food environments, and so on, it is definitely, you know, something that that we need to focus on. And I'm glad that also this topic, you know, is getting sufficient, I think, attention from the point of view of my colleagues, myself also. Definitely we need to do much more than what we're doing, and we need to implement more. You know, there was, I'll just give one case probably from the work that we were doing that was happening in Glasgow, and we were working on, at that time, that was a 10-year learning and evaluation program called Go Well. You can Google it, it still exists, Go Well. That was to evaluate the urban renewal program across the Glasgow region. And well, as you know, in the UK especially, but in other countries as well, you know, there was a lot of need for urban renewal because of the poor housing that was, you know, post-war housing that was constructed. Some ghettoization also happening, where social tenants tended to live in sort of isolated from the rest of the society, and a lot of poverty issues, you know, substance abuse, crime was coming from just this lack of support. So at some point, governments thought we need to give them better housing. That was a hypothesis, you know, from the, of course, it's also coming from science, but then this is where, you know, we're coming, that lack of system vision. So we would give them a better housing, and then people will catch up. And what we learned from a workshop during Go Well study is that giving people great houses just makes them sit there, watch the TV in a better house. Of course, that results in some better health outcomes, but it doesn't really solve their social problems, right? It doesn't give them jobs. It doesn't give them any kind of support. So, you know, in terms of just support from the society as well, social support. So if this kind of, you know, great initiatives that cost a lot of money are implemented on just one side, that, you know, we solve the physical problem, but now we also need to solve the social problem at the same time. So if these initiatives don't come together, we can't hope for a perfect result. So that's probably where we need, and that's just, you know, one example. That's why I wanted to give it, just illustrates very well. But whenever we do things, we need to think about as many sides as possible, so that, you know, if we talk about governments, then different structures come together, different departments come together and work together. This is already happening quite a lot. I think people are realizing, you know, for climate change, we work with health specialists, we work with environmental specialists, and politicians, of course, you know, and all kind of sectors. So, you know, generally when we want to solve a complex problem, and environmental problems are complex problems, and health problems and social justice, social inequalities are complex problems, often we need to have solutions from as many sides that we can cover, basically, that come to complement each other. So yeah, so that is also our contribution to the social justice. And here is a lovely dog that is trying to listen to what we're saying.
Hello, lovely dog. Oh, thank you so much, Elena, because you're describing this, how these complex topics are interconnected, and more holistic approaches need to be taken when it comes to strategic planning and local planning and decision making. So if you could just elaborate and speak a little bit more, because your environmental and social psychology sits in the School of Higher Economics in Moscow. So if you could just describe more about how these themes are relevant to economics.
Right, yeah. So, well, I'll have to say that economics is not really my area. I'm a psychologist, as I was saying, you know, social scientist. Economics is also, I think, considered to be one of social sciences, but we don't necessarily often work together. However, you know, the research university in which I'm working is just a big university with many faculties. So everyone is doing some kind of, you know, it doesn't have to be related to economics. But myself, when I was coming to work here, I was actually quite interested, because I think we all need to collaborate, and without economists we cannot explain, we cannot, not necessarily explain, but we cannot bring to attention the environmental topic well enough. We need really smart economists who will understand, you know, when we talk about climate change, what we're talking about is, you know, the risks that we're talking about. You know, now we, I think, 1.1, sort of approaching 1.1 above the pre-industrial levels. So 1.5 is already catastrophic irreversible change. 2 is basically a disaster, yeah, if we label it that way. So probably already approaching 1.5 is going to appear as an economic crisis, because you know, there will be all sorts of changes coming to, you know, in terms of, you know, something like migration, for example. We are already complaining about migration. It will be worse, because some areas are already, you know, we could see that in, I think that was the heat wave in India. Was it last winter or the winter before? I can't quite remember. When the country faced environmental refugees in quite a serious flow. So yeah, that was the year before the COVID. So what we saw is that the rainfall was not sufficient enough for people to have just, you know, water in their regions. So they had to displace themselves in search for water. This is just one single example. When you look what is happening in Australia, in California, you see, you know, Siberia burning, you see Amazon forest, you know, also being destroyed and burned by the because of the heat waves. At some point, you understand that this does bring sufficiently dangerous consequences for our lifestyles that will change the landscape, because what we're talking about is that the heat waves will become more frequent, more severe, and that basically our temperatures, you know, sort of that that doorstep kind of this threat is moving from south to north. So what regions, southern regions, are facing now this is what we are going to face, and we don't know exactly in how many years, because this can be quite quick. The problem with climate change that it's a system with feedback loops, with tipping points. When something small suddenly can trigger really big changes. Now you probably hear about the ice is melting really fast. I think now with COVID, we were also focusing a lot on health issues, whereas the environmental issues got less attention this year. I can even see, my own attention, how it's moving. We're all, kind of suffering from the changes that are happening right now. But basically, the climate change problem is moving on behind the scenes and is not waiting for us. It's just happening, whether we pay attention to it or not. So coming back to the economy, we need economists to explain that the impact on our societies will be huge, that companies won't be able to make profit, that we will all face, different health issues, that we will be facing financial issues. And in this kind of situation, our society will not function as it is functioning now. We probably struggle to fully picture it, and we struggle to, scientists also have been said to under-report, the potential dangers. So when some people think, it's all alarmism, is not an alarmism. It's, just go and live and see the reality of people who live with the constant sea rise, who are facing frequent floods, who are looking for water, can't find it in their, homes. So economy is really strongly linked. And then probably one more question, regarding this is that, well, all of this teaches us something probably, this environmental crisis, not only climate change, but also environmental change, teaches us about the fact that we have a right to a point where we can't really grow anymore. We have overgrown, some of us still continue, and probably even more so because our general level of wealth has risen. So we can have families with 3 children and things like that. Now, can our Earth sustain human growth, and can it sustain this endless economic growth, this endless production? And when this is well, the limits, we've been told already many times, have been reached, as far as in the 70s. Now we are overusing, and we are using, in credit what we were given. So basically we need to come to an understanding that growth, we're talking about probably some kind of I would say illusionary growth also, because the economy, it's a different subject from the reality, I would say, sometimes when we talk about numbers and so on.
Traditionally, it has been very separate, but it's absolutely apparent that economics and environmental understanding need to be taken in the same scope, really, for our visioning going forward. But they're very concerning and alarming realities that we're coming to grapple with and coming to understand. Is there anything in terms of your research for environmental sustainability, and particularly the psychology, and to help empower people in the way forward for ourselves as individuals? Is there anything you want to talk about for our benefit in dealing with the overwhelm, and maybe being able to use that in a positive or more proactive way?
Yeah, definitely. Psychology does a lot in this sense. We work a lot on pro-environmental behaviors and behavior change, so we can assess what is happening with, for instance, when something that we did in the UK with colleagues from Cardiff University. We worked on the evaluation of the English plastic bag charge, for example, and then we could see, we could measure it in different ways, and we could see that this was really efficient. Then we asked also people regarding, and that was all over the media as well. We've asked them about what sort of other changes they were ready for, such as coffee cups that since then are happening, and bottle deposit return scheme, and kind of additional charges for excessive packaging and things like that. And people were really supporting all that, saying that we don't necessarily need all this plastic around. So this is something that is very realistic, and definitely, psychologists continue to evaluate these kind of programs. Then they are taking on board by the governments directly, and that is, very helpful. That is also definitely influencing the society, because people can hear some kind of feedback, because that was on the media, on BBC and everywhere. So Guardian, that was all, definitely beneficial. Then what else we can do, and what we're doing is that we do research on communication, so environmental communication, climate change communication. So what we need is probably efficient ways to communicate about climate change, and that's going to be more sort of demanded. The demand for this will grow definitely in the next years. How to communicate about this, how to communicate about adaptation, but also how to influence the behaviors, people's behaviors in terms of climate change. People basically need to know what is climate change, what are the dangers, what are the potential impacts to themselves, to their families, because if it's someone else or in a different country, that's not going to work. We need to know what will happen to ourselves, potentially when, what are the short-term impacts, what are the longer-term impacts, what are the potential impacts for our children, and then from there come and say what we can do now, at which pace we should be doing, when we should be doing, and this should be well explained, it should be clear, it should be simple as well, and a lot of these actions are simple. But what the research, again, Cardiff University has a large center for climate change called CAST, so that this scientific center produces a lot of useful reports that are simple to understand, that people can refer to and look, for their data, basically showing that people are ready to even, measures that we were thinking about some time ago, that there were high-cost measures such as stopping to eat meat, stopping flights. Actually, people learning about climate change, and the learning has been happening since, since Fridays for Future and Greta movements, whatever, some of us are slightly skeptical about this kind of approaches, but actually this has taught the whole society a lot about climate change. It has educated the West about the need to fight for our future, and not to fight necessarily, but to protect our future, basically. Having this kind of information, then we need guidelines, simple, as we have guidelines for health, for the NHS, for example, in the UK, we should have the same for the environment, for climate change. What we can do every day to stop this problem from happening, because we are not even not doing enough. We just don't think about this, and this is totally total ignorance. It's a total disaster. We're all collectively moving to COVID. It's just a very small problem compared to what climate change will bring. Climate change will also bring a lot of disease that we haven't known before, or probably we had known before, but there were somewhere in the permafrost, there are some bacteria, some disease coming out. There is malaria. What would if malaria would come to the UK, in like 5-10 years time? How that would be, we think it's far away somewhere, but
affects everybody.
The nature is not going to wait for us.
No, you're absolutely right. It's not something that's happening somewhere else.
And probably just one more thing, what psychology can also do, because we are sort of, I think we're well positioned to be the mediators between different sectors, bodies, and so on. So politicians, like commercial sector, private sector, education specialists, educators, doctors, who else? Basically, whole of the society should work together. So I'm sure that, well, there is implementation science, for example, definitely that those people should be able to help with that. But what we need people, because stakeholders from different sectors, they don't have time to work together. They need some kind of impetus to solve problems together. So they need also people who will link them, who will help them to work together, because it's different very often. If they don't fight against each other, they often just misunderstand totally each other. So I think there will be part of psychology, in terms of climate change, definitely we would need, because this will be the from far the hugest problem that we would face at some point, and psychology would definitely be well positioned to play the role of mediator, by understanding basically people's minds and, their aims, their sort of backgrounds, and the differences of perception of each other. That's where psychology could help to bring that all together. Yeah, that's my
and climate change is absolutely a common ground, quite literally, isn't it, for all of us? Thank you so much, Elena. And you've described some really difficult topics, but very clearly and in ways so that we can relate to as individuals, and things that we can respond to as individuals. I've got a couple of more personal questions. Would you be able to describe something more about your own personal journey and your personal growth whilst dealing with these enormous topics?
Well, my personal journey is that I think, I grew up between city and nature, somewhere just in between. So I think city is wonderful because it brings the culture, and nature is just something that we need. We may realize or not that we need it, but each of us needs nature. In environmental psychology, there is a whole lot of topics about the restorative potential of nature, how it restores our attention, our well-being, our health. And there are studies, huge amount of studies showing that nature is crucial for our health and well-being, and even for our cognitive performance. So we work better when we had a contact with nature. We also recover better, for hospital patients who had views, green views from their hospital rooms. They had less inflammatory processes happening and faster healing. So it's really quite encourage anyone who is interested to look into those studies and just have this as a backup for anything. So my own growth, I don't know what to say really about my own growth. I'm just going trying to do my best in life, really, just usually, and try to work there where things are most needed somehow. So I can't say much about this, but the topic of the environment is really important to me personally, I think, because of this, what I've just said. One side is really good to have good cities, but good cities also should have sustainable cities, should also have enough nature for people to when we're in a lockdown, for instance, it's really good to have a park, and it's good that the parks are open. Probably we need to have some people to remind us that we shouldn't gather in like big groups or enjoy picnics in times of pandemics or lockdowns, but we definitely need our parks to exercise, to walk. It's crucial. If we don't want to have the burden of other disease after COVID.
Is that what?
And then we need to preserve nature.
Is that what? Could you talk about what inspires you? Is that what inspires you? This balance between human city life and nature, or is it purely the natural world?
I think both. Yeah, definitely both, because cities are sort of a source of inspiration in one way, and nature is the source of inspiration in a completely different way. When we're in a city, we are probably more focusing on ourselves, and when we go into the nature, ourselves disappear, and we need both. Yeah, so we need to be on one hand is probably, you know, the natural side is probably the side of our heart, whereas the city is the side of our head. So, you know, we say that the good balance comes together with, you know, speaking sort of in psychology terms, if emotion and cognitive, you know, coming together, when they both work together, you know, even from the brain science says us that it's really good. And you know, if we talk more about kind of spiritual thing, not necessarily spiritual, but just, you know, everyday things, it's our heart and our mind, you know, also coming together. We need both sides to be balanced people, you know, eco-balanced as well. So that's where we are. Yeah.
Thank you. I really like the way you describe that, you know, that complement between our own inner dynamic, really, and as a social species. So just before I close then, is there anything else you would like to say or discuss?
Well, not necessarily, but what I would like just to say is that we need people like you to continue to do this, to inspire people, to teach them, to share with them. So I really hope that you have enough, you know, inspiration, sources of inspiration, strength, inner strength, outer strength, anything that you need to, you know, transmit the knowledge to people, to train them in a way to become, you know, kind of, I don't know whether they should be ego citizens, something like that, or, you know, system citizens. Probably even better, because if you are system citizens, then you cover all faces, all sort of facets. So I wish you good luck with really with your project, and I think it will be very, very beneficial for our societies. So. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Elena, and thank you for your time talking today. I will
welcome,
include those links you mentioned. Was it Go Well,
okay.
and also the cast link?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I will send you. I'll send you that. Yeah.
And also your own professional profile and website,
Sure.
so people can have a look at that. We'll include that in the information below this video. So thank you for your time today.
Yeah, you're welcome.
A wonderfully rich and succinct talk that you've given.
Just a Saturday talk.
But thank
we can
you.
talk.
And hopefully we could revisit this again in the future.
Yeah, sure.
People listening, thank you so much for listening. If you want to subscribe to the channel, then please do, and share it as well, because Elena's message is something that we all really need to hear in these times. So also a little update on Ecobalance Courses. There are some free tasters. There's very limited places available. I'll put the link to the website below this video as well. And until next time, thank you for listening. Take care. My love to you and all beings.
Thank you.